Thanks so much, Asho. Our next speaker is Mr. Silverman. He's one of the two speakers at this conference that are actually representing their governments. He's worked in many places in the Middle East, from Jerusalem to Cairo, Ankara, Tikrit in Iraq, Riyadh as well. His 3-year post in Stockholm, no doubt, provided him with a very different climate from the Middle East, differences in weather, culture, and politics. So we're eager to hear your thoughts on the region. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily, and thank you to Oded, who has shown such great leadership in engaging the governments and the think tanks and ensuring such a productive and creative interchanges between them. So look forward to working more with Oded in the future. Let me touch on 3 issues and look forward to having more of a discussion in the question and answer phase. I would start off with what makes this week so different than any other week, and why I have to be very careful on the first of my 3 topics, which is Iran. And the reason being is, of course, we all know that the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency is meeting this Friday. And so there are a lot of intense negotiations going on as I talk, and intense consultations with our friends and allies. And so I'll touch on Iran, and we can talk more about it in the question and answer. The second topic I'll touch on is just the U.S. policy towards the weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. And thirdly, I'll just sort of pinging off of Professor Sussman's comments about the Arab Spring, give a different perspective on the regional turmoil. About Iran, let me just review quickly our policy. I think we all know that the U.S. has 3 major concerns with Iran. They are its support for terrorism, Iran's development of and continued interest in developing a nuclear weapons program, and third, its brutal repression of its own people. So these 3 concerns together create an Iran which is a threat to international security, international peace. The U.S., under President Obama, has been pursuing and continues to pursue a dual-track strategy of both engagement and pressure, 2 tracks working at the same time. The intention is to incentivize the regime in Iran to improve on all 3 of those, in particular on the nuclear issue. The development of a nuclear weapons program is simply unacceptable in Iran. The word is unacceptable. And we have a new initiative now, thanks to the Director General's report of the International Atomic Energy Agency, to take a very serious look at this program in Iran, and that's what the Board of Governors will be doing this week. So there's a whole lot we can say at this point about what's going to happen next week. As Yogi Berra said, I'm bad at predicting things, particularly in the future. But I would say that what our spokesman said in Washington is we're studying this report, and I would add that we're deeply consulting our allies and friends in the region and in the world to get the best possible result we can in Vienna later this week. In Israel, there are 3 parts of the government that are deeply involved in this. It's the Prime Minister's office and the related national security apparatus. It's the Foreign Ministry, and it's the Israel Atomic Energy Agency Commission. Each of those 3 have a big role to play in what goes on in Israel's position in Vienna, and we're deeply involved in talking to them daily and hourly as our positions develop. So I would say stay tuned. The news has been quite interesting. I mean, the report is a restricted report. I'm not going to be constrained about what I can say about it, but it's also been leaked to the press, so I think people have probably read that report. Let me just add the U.S. policy about the weapons of mass destruction free zone and the related conference in 2012. The U.S. supports this weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East as an achievable long-term goal. It can only be achieved in the context of a comprehensive, durable peace in the Middle East, and only after Iran and Syria fully comply and return to compliance with their international obligations. We must also take into account, when we look at this issue, Israel's unique security requirements, and note that the U.S. remains completely committed to an ironclad commitment to support Israel's security needs. In that context, we supported this, and we are looking forward to the Finnish leadership on this in 2012. Let me add about a little bit from a different perspective. There's different names: Arab Spring, Arab Fall, Arab Winter. Now I'm hearing, turmoil in the region. I would, maybe it's the government perspective, maybe it's the cautiousness of a diplomat, but I wouldn't tend to globalize this. I would tend to look at each place as a separate place. Yes, there are common economic causes throughout the region. We saw in Israel as well, some massive protests over cost of living issues. These exist in all the region, and it's a shared concern. However, how this plays out in each place is different. And Islamist parties, for instance, if that is the main concern, and I share, the U.S. government shares those, but they play out differently in each place. The Islamist party in Tunisia is not the same as an Islamist party in Egypt, is not the same as an Islamist government in Turkey or in Saudi Arabia. In each place it's different, and I would recommend that we spend the time to look at separate causes, separate contexts, separate opportunities to engage governments and to affect what goes on in those places. In that general look, I would focus on one country in particular. It's not just because the Deputy Chief of Mission and my friend Mustafa Al-Ghuni is here from the Egyptian Embassy, but take a look at Egypt, because the other thing I would say is not each of these countries are the same. I mean, Libya was an enormous surprising and good result at the end so far. We're now going to be engaging with this new government there. But Libya doesn't have the same regional weight as Egypt does. Egypt is unique. It is by far population-wise and influence-wise the most important Arab country. It is going through a very long transition. If this was a novel, and if Egypt's transition after the Mubarak government was a novel, I think we were just ending chapter one of a mini chapter novel. So there's a long way ahead of us, and so it's too early to say what will happen next. This is a place with a deep civil society that has now emerging after years of benign but nevertheless repression there, and I think the best we can all do is remain engaged. Israel as well. Israel has a long peace treaty for almost 30 years now with Egypt, and engagement on the economic side. I would just note Israel-Egypt relations, despite all the turmoil, we use the word turmoil, quite good right now, I would say. I mean, that's maybe a contrarian thought, but let's just review what's happened in the last month between Egypt and Israel. There was a terrible terrorist incident August 18th. This is not unheard of in Israel. 5 people were killed. People coming out of Gaza did what they call a U-turn and attacked across the Israel-Egypt border. There was a firefight in response. Tensions between the two countries resulted, and the two militaries jointly did an investigation. The investigation resulted in an Israeli apology, which resulted in all kinds of things changing. A dual American-Israeli citizen was released, Ilan Grappel. You saw Egypt effectively intervening with the Hamas regime to get Gilad Shalit released in a prison deal. You saw now the Israeli government going back to Cairo and intensively engaging to reopen its embassy in Cairo, all in the last couple of weeks. So I can say that there's a lot of interchange between the two governments, and yes, there's turmoil, but we also have good things coming out of this turmoil. with that, I'll end my remarks.